This is the viral retro keyboard. And with millions of views on TikTok and hundreds of positive reviews, I had to get to the bottom of this. So I purchased one immediately and then realized a few things. It looks really cool. It has this really cool controller thing, like video games, but it also has one glaring issue. The sound. Well, howdy hey, I'm Hipyo Tech, and I've been building keyboards for 5 years so you don't have to. But wait, maybe you should. But have no fear, because I'm gonna be putting my 5 years of keyboard experience to the test to make this thing sound as good as possible, with 3 different methods that you can follow at home, if that's even possible. And I know what you're thinking, Hipyo, I like clicky sounds, please stop hating. Well wait, what if I told you that we could make clicky sounds better? Not gonna say great again, for reasons. But I know what you're thinking. What are those 3 methods, Hipyo? How can I save this keyboard? Is that spot on my butt? Sorry about that. Went a little bit too deep there. But let's go over those 3 methods right now. And make sure you're taking notes. Now, method 1 is gonna be foam. Generally, foam can make any keyboard sound good to a certain extent, because the issue here might be a little bit deeper. So the first thing we're gonna do is take this keyboard apart and start filling it with things. Although we might encounter some problems along the way. Like, how do you get it open? For method 2, we have lube. No, not that kind. If the issue is actually the clicky switches, then we might need to take them apart and lube them by hand, which, trust me, it could be worth it. However, I also have a trick up my sleeve, which we'll talk about later. But if that doesn't work, we're gonna have to go nuclear. Now, for the nuclear option, this is where it could get really bad. If first filling this keyboard with foam and lubing all of the switches doesn't work, then the only way we're gonna get rid of that clicky, annoying sound is by completely changing everything. Now, this could be really good for you if you don't like clicky keyboards or if you want this retro aesthetic. So make sure you stick around to the end. Or if you just wanna see me suffer, some of you might be into that, so. But first, how did we even get here? And what is this keyboard? Well, let's go back to past Hipyo, who knows much more about this keyboard than me. Wait, but I'm future Hipyo. No! Howdy hey, past Hipyo here, and I have no idea what happened in the future whatsoever. No ideas. Nope. Now, when I've looked at this keyboard in the past, I thought it was kind of trash because it had clicky switches, and I personally don't like clicky switches, and that's my personal bias, and that's fine. But why did I look at this keyboard in the past? Well, this is the 8BitDo retro mechanical keyboard, and it's kind of gone famously viral on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, anything where people don't do a lot of thinking. Now, similar to people that don't do a lot of thinking, I'm gonna do a lot of thinking on how to make this keyboard sound better. Okay, I clearly didn't think over that line. And this keyboard is actually really compelling because it comes with this really interesting clicky controller. I'm not going to talk about that much. And it's relatively affordable at only $89.99, which I'll have linked down below. Oh, remember how I said I wasn't going to talk about the controller? Well, boom, I'm talking about the controller. It's a programmable macro pad that's kind of neat. It has 2 buttons. You can program it. Yeah, there you go. Now, I know for some of you, you're gonna be like, wait, Hipyo, I don't care about this keyboard. It's a budget keyboard. It sounds clicky. I don't even like the retro aesthetic. Number 1, why are you even here? It's 3 minutes into the video. But then number 2, I'm still gonna teach you 3 different ways to mod your keyboard that you can apply to almost any keyboard. So even though I'm using this silly little retro keyboard as a muse, secretly I'm just teaching you how to make keyboards better. Ha ha ha, you signed up for learning. In fact, I actually think most of what I'm doing to this keyboard would apply best to some of the other budget keyboards, or their Xbox version, which I thought was really cool. They did send me this one. I bought the other one, but they sent me this one. But the Xbox version actually has less of a sound problem because they use newer switches that do sound better. I'll give you a bit of a sound test at the very end, but they are still obscenely clicky. And if 8BitDo is gonna keep making really cool looking aesthetic keyboards that don't sound or feel very satisfying to type on, then I guess I need to lay down a good foundation of how to fix them. Now here's the thing. Both of these keyboards are adequate. Like, you could use these keyboards, they would do good work, you could type on them, but I think we could do massively better. Like, just listen to how they sound right now. Now, both of those would get you kicked out of an office, they'd also get you kicked out of a bedroom, and they'd also get you kicked out of my house. So let's go ahead and see what we're working with here. And thankfully, these boards are hot swappable, which means you can remove any of the switches without needing to solder or desolder. And oh, that's so clicky. Now, this whole entire story begins with these switches. What switches, you might ask? These are keycaps on a keyboard. Well, these switches. You hear that undeniable click? Well, they actually feel pretty amazing to type on because of this amazing tactile feedback. But the click could get you in a lot of trouble. Maybe you're gaming at night and you have a roommate, or God forbid, a wife? Yikes, you're doomed. Let me introduce you to the nemesis of this video, these clicky box kill switches, which, to be fair, they are some of the best clicky switches that you can get, but they're still clicky switches. The Xbox ones are clear and a little bit better. They sound a little bit deeper, but still super clicky. Now, the thing about these switches is that they have a click bar in them, so when you press them down, it makes an audible click, meaning that it's gonna be a little bit hard to tweak them, but I also think I might be able to remove it. And considering some retro keycap sets do cost around $100 on their own, maybe this is worth saving. The 8BitDo retro keyboards are undeniably cool. Like, the fact that they have all these retro knobs and remind you of retro consoles and have these random clicky controllers. Also pretty cool, especially for how affordable they are compared to some other fancy boutique keyboards. But that begs the question, if you don't like the click, what do you do? Also, why does it click? And how can we fix it? Does it even need to be fixed? These are all very good questions, and for some of you, the answer might be totally different because keyboard sound comes down to this one magical thing, preference. Now, I think this sounds terrible, but you might think, hey, that sounds pretty good. I love a good war crime. And that's totally fine. It's okay to be wrong and it's okay to have different opinions. But let's get to the bottom of this. Keyboard switches have three basic types: linear, tactile, and clicky. Clickies are generally both tactile and clicky. We won't get into that. Now, we could swap these switches out, but let's save that for the end of this video because first, maybe it's that incredibly hollow case making this keyboard sound bad. Like, maybe the clicks of these switches aren't actually the problem here. Maybe it's just the shell. And having a really good keyboard foundation means that any switch could actually shine a lot better. We'll come back to these later. Now, the one bummer with this keyboard is that it's really awful to take apart and mod. First, we have to remove these rubber feet on the bottom, which really sucks because then we have to remove the rubber feet on the bottom. Not gonna be able to get those back on very easily, which reveals a screw. But that's not the hardest part yet. It gets worse. Okay, so super easy first step. Unscrew this. No big deal. Here's where it gets more interesting though. Grab these bad boys and prepare for hell. To open this thing up, you have to pry out all of the clips.
1 hour later.
There we go. Oh, that's kind of brutal. Oh my God. And interestingly enough, after getting the board open, I found it was entirely empty. No foam to be seen anywhere. Like, what? In 2025? And there is nothing. I think there's a lot we could do here, actually. I am much more excited now. I'm excited that they did nothing. That means I get to do something. And you do too at home. You get to follow along. It's totally empty. I'm also weirdly excited about this PCB because look, it's also naked. Maybe I tape mod this thing. And I'll explain what that is in just a second. Now, I think for the foam, I'm gonna use pillow foam because this honestly ends up making almost every board sound deeper, especially when it clips down. This whole entire thing clipping down is gonna press down the foam. It's gonna sound so good. I hope, theoretically, asterisk, asterisk. Now, the tape mod is an absolutely incredible mod where we take this basic boring painter's tape, we put it on our keyboard PCB like so, and next thing you know, our keyboard might sound like heaven. Now, on a board like this with a battery, I always recommend you use electrical tape rather than painter's tape. The reason being, you might actually start a fire. That is a genuine concern. Do not use painter's tape if your board has a battery. Yeah, especially around your battery. This one is shielded, so it's a little bit less of a worry, but I still probably wouldn't do what I'm doing. Yeah, even though I'm still doing it. Ignore the part that I'm still doing it. So I just did this kind of cross-stitch pattern for it, just so that I have a really nice coverage on the board. You don't have to be that extra about it, but maybe it'll help with the acoustics. We'll find out in a little bit. So far, you can't really tell the difference. It might sound a little bit poppier, but the main thing is gonna be comboing that with the foam. Now, if you're at home, you're probably wondering, what foam do I even put in my keyboard? Well, a lot of different foams. Now, on this channel, I've done crazy stuff, from Play-Doh to erasers, but pillow foam tends to be my personal favorite. Honestly, if you have a board with a battery, I don't necessarily recommend something like this that's that flammable. It might be best to do maybe automotive dampening foam, like Kill Mat, where you just place a really nice layer in your board and next thing you know, it sounds really good. That would be the smart thing to do. I'm gonna put pillow foam in it. Don't do this. Maybe go for pour-on foam or something a little bit more simple. But again, I like pillow foam. I think it adds just such a nice full sound to my keyboard. It's also really annoying to mod your keyboard with, but I guess I really like annoying things because I like my own videos. Now, at a glance, you're probably like, Hipyo, there's literally no way you're gonna get this keyboard case closed. And well, you may well be right, but I forgot about this part. I think it plugs in right here. Now, you probably think I won't get this closed, but check this out. Have you ever heard of forcing things? I'm really strong. Oh my God, literally my watch is saying my heart rate is high. Okay, all right. All the doubters in the chat, please leave a like. Thank you so much. Now I just have to go ahead and screw it together with a little bit of magic. So part 1 was done. It was relatively easy. Well, ignoring taking apart the case. Putting foam in there was pretty fun. I gotta say, the tape mod I think is gonna be really, really good for this thing. Now, if your keyboard isn't clicky, doing those mods will make it sound less pingy, more deep, more thocky. And for this keyboard, it did all of that, but it's still clicky. Here's a little sound test for you. But there's just one problem. It's still really clicky. So I think that's time to move on to phase 2, the lube. Now for lube, there's 2 different options I could take here. Number 1 is I get every single switch, I take it apart, and I brush lube it by hand. This would make the board feel a little bit smoother and definitely sound a little bit better, but let me try another option as well, and you can tell me which you think is better. If you're doing this at home, number 1, you pull out your switch. Easy peasy, switch puller. This board is hot swappable. That's incredible. Love that. But then here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. If you're doing the lube every switch by hand step, which honestly is objectively better, you have to take your switch, put it in a switch opener, and then pop it open individually. And you'll have to do that for every single switch. And keep in mind, because these are clicky, there's a mechanism here that's gonna be a little bit annoying. Now, here's the thing. What you could do is remove this little click bar from your switch. That way, you don't have a clicky switch anymore. Let me test it out. Oh, my spring disappeared. Oh no. Or you could lose a spring and crawl around on the floor like an idiot looking for it because they didn't give you any spare switches and you need the spring to build the switch. And without that, spring, spring, spring.
Hipyo never found the spring and instead had to take one from a sacrificial switch. Please press F to pay respects.
Now, the problem with the strategy is removing the click bar from a click bar clicky switch just kind of means you're making the switch worse overall. It's kind of like making a Twitter user not hate themselves. I don't actually know that that's that much better. So let's try something different than just removing the click bar. This is super lube oil, and so is this, but in a much smaller, way easier to use version. This is just for refills, for drinking, mayhaps. I'm gonna try to lube every single switch individually by just dripping a little gloop glop in there. Let me show you how I do it. It's gonna save you hours of time. And considering removing the click bar doesn't make the switches any better, I'm thinking this is the last resort to maybe make it a more satisfying click before we just go and swap the switches out entirely to something that'll just make this whole entire board sound and feel way better. Now, this whole process is super duper easy, so easy that even I can do it. All we do, pop a keycap off, take this guy. I suggest using tweezers so you don't get your fingers super duper ultra gloop gloppy. And we're just gonna put like 1 drop of lube on the side of each slider, and then dap, 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 dap. Now, after doing that once, I'm not sure that you can tell the difference, but maybe just listen to these 3. So here's the no click. Yikes. Here's the click with lube. And here's the click without lube. But what if I did it to the whole board? Bazinga. All the keycaps are off, easy peasy. Now, we just grab our lube and we suffer through 1 drop at a time on every single switch. We could do it. It shouldn't take too long. It's actually a lot better than lubing every switch by hand. And I'm also gonna press these down with a little bit of bazinga. Now let me do more magic because you definitely don't wanna watch that. Okay, so with all of these switches lubed, they're definitely a little bit moist. Definitely got lube all over my hands. That's definitely not too fun. But they are sounding and feeling a little bit better. And I'm excited to get these keycaps on. So let me just go ahead and Now, here's the thing. It sounds a lot better. It feels so much better after lubing it, but it's still clicky. It's still really high pitched. Honestly, I could be happy with this, except
I'm not happy with this. We need to go deeper. It's time for part 3.
now, if you're new to keyboards, thocky keyboard sounds tend to be the most popular. So my biggest thing is I want to make this thock. Now, in order to do that, it obviously can't click. So we're going to need to get these switches out and replace them with something thockier. But what is thockier, you might ask? Let's get these switches out. A little bit of magic.
Now, when picking out your switches at home, there's a ton of different options that you can go with, and it's really hard to go wrong with any switch that's made in the last year or so. But I'll have a couple options linked down below from Kinetic Labs. On their own, these JWIC switches that I had sounded and felt pretty good, so I'm pretty confident that they're gonna sound and feel pretty good in the board as well. And if you get any cheap budget board with hot swappable switches, you can always replace the switches later, which is a very great thing. And remember how earlier that I told you that this was the nuclear option? Well, it's actually the easiest option, it just costs money because it means you have to buy new switches. And you have to give Nola the scratch tax because she likes being scratched by switches for some reason. She's a little freak. Look at her go. Please comment, love you, Nola. Now, with this board, I could replace the keycaps as well, except the keycaps are already pretty thick and pretty decent quality, so they're not doing anything bad against this board. But what does future Hipyo think?
Okay, so we finished the keyboard. We replaced all of the switches in here. I know you can't tell because it looks exactly the same, but this is a totally different beast. It feels different to type on, it sounds different to type on, and overall, I am so much happier with this. So what's my final verdict modding the viral retro keyboard? I think if you want to keep this thing clicky, then you can do a lot of stuff to it relatively easily that makes it sound and feel better. If you want this thing to not be clicky, guess what? It's hot swap. It's super easy to do. All you do is replace the switches. But you might want to do some of those other mods too, because those make a huge difference here as well. Anyways, I'd love to know what you think. Was this a fun video idea? Was it fun seeing me mod keyboards? Do you think that this keyboard sounds like heaven?